If you've been around any competitive gaming community for a while, there's a good chance you've heard about LANs. These big in-person events where hundreds of gamers like yourselves come together to watch and compete in some amazing Splatoon tournaments, or whatever game they are there for. LANs tend to draw a lot of attention in the Splatoon community, and many creators including myself will often advertise and play at these events. I myself have been to 8 major LANs for Splatoon, and hopefully soon to be more, as well as 2 local LANs. I've placed in the top 10 of every competitive LAN I've attended, and my former team Cherry Limeade won the whole thing at Shine 2022. It's pretty safe to say that I, as a seasoned LAN veteran, love them. But what's so special about LANs anyway? And most importantly for today, what should you know if you choose to attend one? Hello, I'm Pika, a high-level Splatoon competitive player, coach, and frequent LAN attendee. I now want to teach you everything you could possibly need to know about Splatoon LANs. From travel prep guides, to tips for competition, to parental sounding advice on taking care of yourself, we have a lot to cover here. This will be a big one, so I'll be dividing this video into chapters so you can easily skip around to topics that are most relevant to you, or come back and review sections later as you prepare to travel. There's no time to waste, so let's get right into it. In case you have no clue what we're talking about, or you just need a refresher, in the gaming world, a LAN is an in-person event, named after the means used to play otherwise online-centric competitive games on a local network. For Splatoon, LAN events are generally divided into 2 categories, these being locals and majors. Locals are smaller-scale casual events, meant to gather players of a specific region to play together, which might include a tournament. A major is a much larger-scale event that holds multiple competitive tournaments for different games, along with side events or activities. Players from across the country, continent, or even the world often travel to go to major LANs. For this video, I'm going to be focusing on major LANs, including recognizable events such as Genesis, Riptide, and Low Tide City, as these require the most preparation and have much larger attendee counts. However, many things covered here are still relevant to local events, and I absolutely encourage you to support your local scene if you have one. LANs are primarily considered competitive events, as the tournaments held there are the main attraction. If you are interested in competing at a LAN, I recommend that you do, even if you're a new competitive player or brand new to the scene altogether. Getting to play the game in an offline environment is something truly special. While there will always be some well-established teams attending, pickup teams are also extremely common, and there are easy ways to find teammates to play with, which we will cover shortly. That all being said, you don't have to sign up to compete to attend a LAN, as spectator passes are available, and you'll still have plenty to do as a spectator. In my opinion at least, the most special part of LANs is the social aspect, as you get to meet so many people with similar interests as you. If you've been in the community for a while, you'll end up finally matching faces to people you've interacted with online before. Also, all major Splatoon LANs take place alongside various other competitive games in the same venue, usually Smash Bros. As long as you buy a ticket for Splatoon LAN, whether it's a spectator or competitor pass, you'll be around different competitive communities, and are free to watch matches for these games as you please. Have you decided to give a LAN a try? The first and most important step is to actually register for the event. The official page for whatever event you're choosing to attend will be the place to go for this, which will usually be found on StartGG. On the event page, you'll be able to read information about it, including what games will be there, dates the competitions are taking place, and the location for where the event is happening. Registration will be available to purchase from the event page. You may see a lot of options for different games and pass types, so just be careful and be sure you're signing up for Splatoon, that you get a competitor pass if you are intending on playing. Also, don't worry if you don't have a team decided right away, as you can still complete registration as an individual and get paired with a team later. Even if you're only going as a spectator, you'll still need to register. Registering is a committal decision, as it's often difficult to get a refund, so don't do it unless you're certain you both want to go and are physically able to. That being said, the sooner you can figure out that you want to go, the better, as the price of registration tends to go up the closer it gets to the LAN. If you're stuck on deciding to go or not, take a look at the registration page anyway, and check when different phases of registration cost are happening to give yourself a date to make your choice by. Once you're registered for Splatoon, look around on the event page for any links to places to get updates from event organizers and staff, so you can keep in touch with any news. As of January 2024, for major LANs being held in the United States, you're going to be looking for the Splat LANs organization. They have a Discord server that you'll absolutely want to be in, as well as a Twitter page for putting out reminders and updates. Within the Splat LANs Discord, there are channel categories for all upcoming major LANs, each with channels for information, places to search for teammates, roommates, rideshare opportunities, and more. I'll have a link to both the Splat LANs Discord and Twitter down below. Once you're all set to attend the LAN, you're going to need a way to get there and a place to stay. There's only so much I could do to help with that process, but there are plenty of tips I can give to help things go as smoothly for you as possible. Before reserving any rooms or flights, you'll need to plan out what dates you'll be spending at the LAN. Major LANs occur over multiple days, usually either 2 days over Saturday and Sunday, or 3 days from Friday to Sunday. These are the dates listed on the official event page, and show you the days that the competition will be held on. These are the days you'll want to be set up and present for, as activities often start in the morning and could go into the evening. Unless you are physically unable due to finances or life obligations, I strongly suggest that you plan to arrive at a LAN the day before competition starts and plan to leave the day after it ends. For example, Low Tide City 2024 is scheduled to take place on May 11th and 12th. Remember, these are the days of the actual competition. If you plan on going to LTC, I believe it's in your best interest to arrive on the afternoon or evening of May 10th and to return home on the 13th, and there are many reasons for this. Most importantly, as a competitor, if you try to arrive the same day that the tournament starts, there's a very good chance that you miss your games, since the competition can start in the morning. If you do try this and are late, tournament organizers, or TOs for short, cannot delay the entire event just for you. Your team will be required to play without you, so don't risk this situation. Another reason to get there early is it gives you that first night to settle into your room, obtain your venue pass, and meet up with friends and teammates so you're all set to get going comfortably on your first day of the competition tomorrow. In a similar way, it sucks to have to leave the venue on the final day when everyone is hanging out watching the last 2 teams compete for the grand prize. So give yourself that extra night to enjoy the experience and say your goodbyes the next morning instead. When it comes to booking a room to stay in, there's a few things to look out for. Most importantly, many major LANs take place in venue space provided by hotels or resorts. Because of this, they often partner with these locations to get LAN attendees deals on booking rooms, essentially at the venue. Be sure you're booking your room as soon as you can before they sell out, since staying in the same building as the event venue is a huge convenience. Having just a few minutes of walking between your room and playing your games will save you plenty of time and energy, and also gives you a place to quickly go to recharge when you get a break. Additionally, for LANs held at the Kalahari Resort, currently including Low Tide City and Riptide, having a room reserved with them gives you access to their water park, which is a frequent place for groups to hang out at. There's also often a full Splatoon group water park session at the end of the final day, so if you want in on that, be sure you book a room at the resort. Another thing for rooming, especially if you're traveling on your own, is to look for people to share a room with. Getting a larger room and splitting the cost will always be cheaper than getting a small room for yourself. Remember that the Splatlands Discord has a channel to look for roommates, and this is why they do it. So find yourself a group and save some money, and you might end up making some new friends too. The group you room with will often also travel around to get food together, so you'll be setting yourself up with people who can look after you. Now you have a room reservation all ready to go, but you still need a way to get to the venue itself. Travel is the last major step, and this especially is the step that's most up to you and your situation. Odds are you'll have to go with air travel, and in which case I pray that the air traffic gods are with you. Speaking of that though, planning to arrive the day before the event starts, as we talked about earlier, is also a great safety measure against bad luck with airport delays or missed flights. Since if you're super unlucky and end up being a day late, you might miss a couple of sets as opposed to missing the majority of the whole event. If you are flying to the LAN, be sure you have a plan on how you'll get from the nearest airport to the venue. Some events may have bus shuttles set up that run to and from the airport and venue. Check for information on this for the LAN that you're attending. If there is one that you wish to utilize, be sure you know what you need to do. Alternatively, the Splatlands Discord may be your best friend once again, as it's very common to see other attendees arriving at the airport at similar times as you, asking to split the cost of rideshare with others, so be on the lookout for those opportunities. Lastly, on air travel, I have a few quick tips from Canadian friends who frequently travel into the US for LANs for any other gamers who need some international travel help. First and foremost, if you don't currently own a passport or need to get yours renewed, get that handled as quickly as possible, as it can take months for your new one to arrive and you'll need that by the time you are traveling. Also, be sure you're all set to function in a different country, most essentially with money and your cellular data. My Canadian friends recommend getting about 100 USD on hand in case you encounter any issues using cards, or if you want to split the payment on meals or anything else. They also recommend a quick check on your cellular data plan before you travel, to be sure you're able to use data while in the US or prepared to rely on Wi-Fi if not. For those of us who are blessed to be within driving distance of a major LAN, if you are able and willing to drive yourself to the event, I highly recommend that you do. This saves you the cost and hassle of dealing with airports, and also gives you the huge buff of having your own vehicle while at LAN. You'll need to go out to get food at some point, and being able to take yourself and some friends out to do that as you wish will save plenty of time and money, and just be fun on top of it all. When I attend LTC every year, I choose to drive myself 7 hours instead of taking a 1 hour long plane ride just so my friends and I can have this quality of life buff over the course of the weekend. The final part of your pre-LAN preparations is figuring out what you need to take with you. As you are traveling, you'll obviously need any essentials that you need on any other trip. This is stuff like clothes, money and your ID, passport if you're traveling internationally, toiletries, phone, and all that. Make yourself a packing list so you don't forget anything. If you're a spectator, this is about all the essentials you'll need to worry about, but there are some extra things to consider later on. For players, there's a few extra things you need to be sure to pack. Most importantly, you'll need to bring your own Switch console, controller, and charging cable if you're using a Pro controller, and your own copy of Splatoon updated to the most recent version. Since player data is saved to your own console and controllers are paired to it, it is mandatory that you have your own console, controller, and game ready in order to compete. The venue will have Switch docks and monitors set up at each station, and you'll just be slotting your console into these docks when you play. Speaking of those provided Switch docks, keep an eye on updates from LAN TOs and staff, as they sometimes may not have enough setups provided to them to run the event, or at least not run it quickly enough. If this does happen, they'll put out an announcement asking for volunteers to bring additional equipment to loan to TOs for the event. This usually only includes Switch docks, power cables, and Ethernet adapters. If you do volunteer your setup, you'll be asked to drop it off at designated times before matches begin, often the night before. Be sure your items are labeled too. This makes sure that TOs can return your items to you properly as quickly as possible. Staff will have tape and markers available at drop-off so you can label your things if you weren't able to beforehand. Again, this extra stuff only applies if TOs ask for extra setups and you sign up to bring yours, so you'll know if you need to worry about this or not. On top of your Switch console and controller, the other bit of hardware you need to bring is your own wired headset, so you can hear game audio and communicate clearly with your teammates while playing. This means that it will need to have an attached microphone. Even though everyone is in person together, the venue can get loud with how many people there are, and your opponents will also be sitting across from you, so communication without headsets is extremely difficult. Due to this surrounding volume, it's advised that you bring a noise-canceling headset if possible, especially if you experience auditory sensory issues. Even if you have earbuds that will work, you probably won't have a great time with them. Also, the headset must be wired so that it can connect into the necessary audio mixers that make everything work. Bluetooth will not do. In most cases, these headsets need to have a 3.5mm audio cable, but check with updates from TOs to be certain. Do not expect to be loaned a headset, so bring your own. I can guarantee you that you'll need at least these things, but check official updates frequently before you travel to see if there are any additional requirements, including anything related to health and safety. Those are the things you'll absolutely need to have with you, but there's more you can consider bringing too to make your time in the venue space more comfortable, even as a spectator. First, you're definitely going to want a water bottle, and ideally one that's labeled or that's clearly unique so you know it's yours. The venue will have security check the contents of whatever you're bringing in, and they may ask you to empty your water bottle, but there'll be water fountains or dispensers inside that you can use to refill and stay hydrated. Speaking of security, while it may be a bit tiring to have them check your bag every time, I still suggest you bring some kind of carry-on bag with you to keep your Switch and other items inside so you can keep all of your things organized and safe. This also gives you a place to put small items you might buy from vendors or that people might be passing out as gifts. Lastly, it can sometimes get pretty cold in the venue, especially if you're ever put on stage to play one of your sets. So if you tend to get cold easily, consider bringing a jacket or some other extra layer to bundle up with. We're finally through all the things to know and have ready before and as you travel to the LAN. Now we're at the event. As a player, what should you be ready for? Let's start with the general format of multi-day LAN tournaments. Exact details are always unique as TOs have to account for the final number of teams that sign up, but in general you can expect to start off playing in some kind of pools phase. Pools are divided into different blocks or sections, which will take place at different times, so be sure you know what section your team is placed in and when you need to be ready to play. These groups also cannot be determined much ahead of time as tournament seeding cannot even begin until after the event registration has closed, so don't ask TOs when you'll be playing months in advance trying to schedule your travel around it because they have absolutely no idea. Anyway, based on your performance in pools, you'll be placed into a bracket. Certain brackets may have a top cut of performers getting placed into a higher bracket later, so it's possible you might play in multiple brackets over the course of the event and likely over multiple days too. For example, if you're put in the redemption bracket after pools and do well there, you'll also make your way into the top bracket, so you'll have plenty of games to play in that case. Those of you familiar with how tournaments typically go might also be surprised initially with how scores are reported as you play your sets. Normally with online events, the players enter their match scores directly into whatever website is being used to run the tournament. On LAN though, you'll be reporting scores to staff who will enter it for you. In the early stages of the event, you'll likely have a pool captain who goes around asking for your team name and for the results of your matches, either after each game or at the end of the set. After the set is over, they'll go to the TO desk and report the scores to be entered from there. Later on in the event, as less matches are going on simultaneously, TOs may ask for results directly. Either way, the only thing you need to do with any tournament page is check on it every so often so you know when you're about to play. Also, be sure at least one member of your team is in the venue about 15 minutes ahead of when your next pool or bracket is about to start so they can check in for your team. TOs will call for a representative of each team around this time to confirm you're all ready to play your sets and explain any important information about the format. Now for the main part of playing at a LAN, actually playing the game in LAN mode. When it's time to play your matches, you won't be creating or joining a private lobby the same way you do online. Instead, you need to go to the shoal, but don't click on private battles yet. There's another step we need to take. You'll need to hold down the ZL and ZR buttons while also pressing in on your left stick for several seconds in order to enter LAN mode. From here, any lobbies you host and join in the shoal will actually use LAN connection and not local wireless. Don't worry about memorizing this button combination, as there will be plenty of reminders at the event itself. Why is the method to utilize this built-in game feature so obscure and hidden? Ask Nintendo. There's a few things to note about connecting to and using LAN mode as well. For one, while this may not affect many players, if you are used to playing the game on tabletop or handheld mode, you cannot access LAN this way, and will have to play with your Switch docked instead. There's no way to connect the console to LAN outside of the dock, so that's just how it has to be. Also, when you are playing on LAN, be careful about any wires on top of or underneath your station, as these wires are what's making the LAN network possible. It happens at every event where someone will get excited during an intense match and accidentally unplug a cable by kicking it or shaking their table and end up disconnecting. So don't end up being that guy. Disconnects don't tend to happen for any other reason while in LAN mode, so don't expect DC replay rules to save you if you lose a game by doing this after it starts. Lastly, while the multiplayer experience will feel more fluid and consistent on LAN than it ever does online, some seemingly laggy moments may still happen. While LAN provides a stable network for the game to be played on, communication between consoles is still limited by Splatoon 3's built-in and rather slow tick rate, so there may still be moments where you get splatted right as you hide behind a wall, or just as you take off from the ground into super jump. I'm just letting you know this now so you don't feel scammed if this does happen to you. The last big thing that's unique about competing on LAN compared to your typical online tournament is the physical environment that you're in. At your normal setup, it's probably just you sitting down to play the game, with your teammates in voice call on Discord, and your opponents are just some names you see in your lobby. At LAN though, everything is different. You're sitting in a different chair and at a different table than you're used to, with your Switch connected to a different monitor. Your teammates are now real people sitting just a few feet to your side, and your opponents are also real people sitting just across from you. Your teammates' voices may sound different in person than what you're used to, and you can see and hear your opponents from behind their monitors while you're playing. Pair all of this with how the game itself might feel different to play with the consistent connection LAN provides, and it all amounts to a completely unique competitive experience and environment to adapt to. The feeling of being in that situation is what I love about competing at LAN tournaments so much, but it's also a lot to take in, especially for your first time. Trust me that you'll get the hang of it quickly though, and remember that everyone else playing around you is feeling that same shock with the new environment as you are. I've got some tips for how to play best in these moments too, but let's wait a moment on those. Since your team and your opponents are all in person sitting at the same station as you compete, you'll have a lot more interaction with the other team than you typically do online. So let's cover some basic LAN courtesy. Have someone from your team establish who is hosting the lobby as quickly as possible so your match can get started on time. That being said, once everyone is in the lobby, if you're the host, confirm with both your teammates and opponents that everyone's equipment is working properly before you start the first match. Tech issues will happen at some point, most commonly involving audio from teammates' headsets, so do a mic check with your team every time you move to a new station. If there are any issues, let your opponent know to wait and flag down a TO as soon as you can so the issue can be resolved quickly. Once your set is over, get up, tell your opponents GG's and offer a fist bump or handshake if you'd like. It's much easier to give genuine compliments and thanks to your opponents on LAN, so take advantage of that. Also, this should go without saying, but be respectful to everyone. They all spent the same time and money as you to travel out to the event, so do your part to make sure everyone else has a great time too. As we've established, playing on LAN can feel significantly different from your typical Splatoon experience. From someone who's been to many LAN tournaments and performed well at them, I have an arsenal of tips to help you make the most of the LAN setting. As Splatoon is a team game, your teammates will be a major part of your experience and performance. Thankfully for us, being in person opens the doors to all sorts of ways for teammates to help each other both in and out of game. Primarily, physically being with each other greatly changes the way you communicate with one another. Emotions are infectious, and especially in person, so it's easier easier than ever on LAN to act as a hype man and positive influence for your team. This really goes a long way in not only having more fun in general, but also helping yourself and your teammates loosen up the nerves that everyone is bound to be feeling to some extent. Speaking of that, body language makes it easier to tell if one of your teammates is feeling especially down or anxious, so keep checking up on each other. If your teammate is comfortable with physical touch, you can offer to give them a hug or pat on the shoulder. A good mental state is always important for good tournament performance, so the more your team can do to keep each other in high spirits, the better everyone will play. Communication about the game with your teammates in person can also be considerably different. For example, normally online, the only way to know what your teammates are doing in a match are by seeing them on your screen or by hearing them make callouts. At LAN though, you can see your teammates' screens too, especially from teammates sitting right next to you. There's nothing illegal about taking a glance at what they're doing to get some extra information, and it's a great way to make use of time while you're stuck respawning. Because of this, teams I play with at LAN often plan out our seating arrangement ahead of time, so that players who pair up with each other most frequently in-game are also sitting next to each other to maximize their coordination. Coordination can extend outside of match time too, as being together physically gives the perfect opportunity to meet up and discuss game plans and get each other in the right mindset before playing your matches. If you or one of your teammates are feeling especially enthusiastic about this, you can even prepare a physical journal or playbook to use as a reference for any information you think is important for when you play, with anything from basic notes to annotated map diagrams. You can share it with your team and take notes in it in your free time, and bring it with you to the venue to read over before your sets or even in between games. After every LAN, I always feel more connected with teammates I played with, and these ways of communicating and bonding with each other in person are exactly why. There are plenty of things you can do to individually boost your performance on LAN as well. One particular quirk about LAN setups that I seem to have particularly bad luck with for some reason is controller interference. From a combination of metal tables frequently being used for the stations and the immense amount of electronics on those stations, you can sometimes experience interference in the signal between your controller and console. What this might feel like is having certain inputs not register sometimes, or in bad cases you might have random moments where your controller stalls on your previous input for a second or more. Most players either don't have this happen to them or don't notice it. If you do find it happening to you and it hinders your play, there are a few things you can do to combat it. The most helpful thing is being sure that there's nothing solid in the space between your controller and your console. If you need to, back up your chair to be sure you aren't holding your controller under the table, and pull your switch dock close to the side of the table and away from large wires. If this isn't enough, you can try rotating the switch dock to see if that helps. I don't know the science behind it. There's one specific orientation that I found that solves my interference on LAN consistently that I posted to Twitter a few months ago, and I'll link that thread down below. Another thing you can do for yourself is to take any opportunity you find to practice on the LAN setups outside of tournament time. I want to heavily stress with this part that you should not just walk up to a station that currently isn't being used and assume that it's open for people to use, especially during tournament time. There's a very good chance that teams currently playing will need that station shortly, so check with TOs before using any setups if it's not your time to compete. With that said, there will sometimes be periods between pools or brackets where not all setups are being used at once for the competitors, and in which case TOs may let players know that they can use spare stations for warm-up. For a better chance at getting some practice, TOs almost always need people to test setups for them the night before the tournament starts to be sure all audio and LAN setups are correctly rigged up. If you see them put out an announcement about this in the Discord server, volunteer to help. You're doing both yourself and the event staff a favor by getting those games in. Lastly, the easiest thing to forget to do while you're caught up in all the fun and hype of a LAN is to take care of yourself. LAN veterans aren't joking when they tell stories of themselves and others forgetting to eat for an entire day. Getting any food in your system is great, but especially if it's something healthy. You're practically guaranteed to order pizza or some other takeout food some night during the event. So if you get a chance to order a salad or some vegetables for one of your meals, you should take that. Keeping yourself well fed will keep up your energy over the whole weekend, which will keep you playing at your best too. Also on the topic of food, most food in the venue or at the place you're staying will be expensive. So to save yourself money and keep your options open, it's a great idea to make a run to a nearby grocery store if you have the time for it. Pick up some nutritious snacks, water bottles, and maybe even some basic meal items like cereal or microwavable meals that can easily prepare in your hotel room. All rooms should come with a microwave and a mini fridge, so you'll have a place to keep these things, as well as any meal leftovers. Having the ability to make pit stops at your room to fill up on some good food makes it much easier to convince yourself to keep eating throughout the day. Self-care goes beyond eating and staying hydrated too, of course. Be sure you're getting enough rest as well. You know you'll be wanting to stay up late hanging out with friends, so be sure you're aware of when you need to be in the venue and ready to play the next day, and plan a reasonable bedtime off of that. Just like eating well, your mind will be much sharper when you're competing if you give yourself a good amount of sleep the night before. Also, both for yourself and for everyone around you at the event, don't forget to stay on top of your hygiene. Don't be one of the people who slaps on deodorant every day and prays it's enough. Your room will have a shower, so use it. As always, when traveling and in an unfamiliar place, it's best practice to be cautious and look out for yourself and others around you. The venue space will have security, and the vast majority of people attending these events alongside you will be wonderful. But it's always wise to be careful, especially around people you don't know. In general, the best safety tip is to never go anywhere alone unless you have to. Have a buddy or group with you when returning to your room or if you go out for food, especially at night. If you do go somewhere on your own or with a different group of people, be sure your roommates, teammates, or whoever you are closest with at the event knows where you're going. It's important to have multiple methods of contact between you and those you're staying with as well. For example, if you normally only communicate with your teammates over Discord, share your phone number with each other while at LAN, so you'll have another way of reaching out to you. Also, be mindful about what people give you. Don't accept drinks or substances offered to you by someone you don't trust, especially if you're underage. Looking out for your mental well-being at LAN events is also important. Things can get loud and crowded pretty frequently while tournament play is going on, and being exposed to that for long periods of time can be overwhelming for anyone, and especially those of us with heightened sensitivity. If loud noises cause you discomfort, it's recommended that you bring either noise-canceling headphones or earplugs with you into the venue. Also, anyone is free to leave the venue and come back through security again on the same day, so if you do find yourself needing to step away for a moment, feel free to do so. I'd recommend pairing that with a trip back to your room to grab some food as well. Or alternatively, some LAN venues like the Kalahari Resort have designated quiet rooms that you can use as well. If you expect you or someone you know might make use of that space, ask around so you know where it is ahead of time. We've gone over all the details on how to get to the LAN and be as prepared as you can be. We traveled all this way to have a great time though, and that's exactly what this last section is about. There will be a lot of things to do and people to meet at LAN, so how can you make the most of it all? I said it way back in the beginning, one of the best parts about LANs is the social aspect. To me, there's such a magical feeling that comes from being in a space with so many other people who love the game so much. Enough that they'd sacrifice all this to be at the event. And it's exactly for that reason that you shouldn't be afraid to talk with people around you. You can assume everyone there knows something about the game, so you can use Splatoon as a foundation to start conversations and start hanging out with people. Also, it's perfectly normal for people at LANs to introduce themselves by their in-game tag or username. In fact, it helps people recognize each other since those are the names we know each other by online. To make it easier to introduce yourself to others at the event, you can order a custom badge with your tag on it, or even attach custom art or other items to the lanyard your pass comes with. Also on the topic of introductions, if you see a player or content creator that you recognize and want to say hello to, simply feel free to come up to us. We're also people who are hanging out at the event and really aren't anything special. If anything, whoever you want to talk to is likely much more approachable and ready to talk with fans while they're at the LAN than at any other time. So long as someone isn't clearly in the middle of playing a tournament set or doing something else, odds are you won't be bothering them. This goes for the tournament organizers too. They'll be busy all weekend. If you do see them having a chill moment, feel free to say hello and thank you. Speaking of TOs, as a general rule, the more smoothly the event is run, the more fun everyone will have, both attendees and staff alike. That's why another simple way to enjoy the event is to respect and listen to the TOs and staff. If they ask you to do something or not to do something, trust that there's a reason for it and go with it. They're doing their best work for everyone at the event and are probably juggling more tasks at a time than anyone realizes, so help them help you and do your part to keep things on schedule. There are direct ways to help with the event as well in the form of volunteering. TOs will always need help getting stations set up, having pool captains get scores, and more, and they'll always put out a volunteer application for these things. This is perfect for spectators to get in on, since you won't have to worry about schedule conflicts with playing any matches, while providing a unique way to get involved with the event and meet new people. LANs are also the perfect opportunity to try commentary. There will be many sets played and streamed over the course of the tournament, so commentators are typically in high demand, and the in-person setting lets you engage with their commentary partner in unique ways. You won't find a more fun and comfortable time to try commentating for the first time than at a LAN, so consider getting that experience. While the main tournament is the ultimate attraction at a LAN, more often than not there will be a side event or two hosted during tournament off hours, usually during the evening. These side events are often centered around some kind of gimmick that can only be done in a LAN setting and are meant to be silly and casual. The classic side event that comes first to my mind is 2 players, 1 controller, where 2 players will control the same game, each in charge of 1 Joy-Con. It's always a chaotic but hilarious time. It's another great way to feel involved. Registration for these side events takes place in the moment, completely separate from main event registration, so even spectators for the main tournament can play on these side events if they want to. My final recommendation for making the most of your LAN experience is to capture the moment. Take photos and videos of the venue and with your friends. There's also plenty of merchandise you can pick up at the event. There'll usually be an official LAN t-shirt you can order, and Splatoon will often have its own poster made by an artist in the community that you can buy too. It's a community tradition that people go around the venue after they obtain their poster to get other attendees to sign it. If you want to do this too, I recommend you bring your own marker. You'll often end up with more goodies than just these though, since some attendees will hand out little gifts like stickers or other cute cute or silly things that you can take with you. You'll often also find artists selling some of their work, so if you're curious about that and want to support our community's artists, then come prepared with some extra cash and grab an extra present for yourself or a friend. Before wrapping up, I want to give a shout out and thank you to several folks who helped out with this video. First are those who reviewed the script as it was being made and pitched in extra information and tweaks, namely Siren, Raze, Zophie, and Lily. Additional credit goes out to everyone who left great tips and suggestions on Twitter when I announced this project, and I'll link that post below for anyone to check out. And last but certainly not least, huge thanks to both Devin from Level 1, which is the organization behind most major LAN broadcasts in recent years, and Hammer, who runs the SoCallie events, for granting permission to use clips from their events in this video. I greatly appreciate y'all's help for this project and for all that you do for the scene in general. I also want to mention here that this LAN guide exists not only in this video form, but also in text that I'll have linked down below and will also be sharing elsewhere. Making something like this has been on my mind for a while since I think it's something this community needs, so I want to be sure to make it as accessible and comprehensible as possible. Having it in text also means it can be edited and added to over time, so I hope this can remain as a relevant resource for a long time to come. I'll know this was all worth it if I hear of even one person attending a LAN in the future who says this guide is what got them to go. Anyway, that's all from me, so thanks for watching and have a good one.